this is your host, Julia Napini. I am a clinical and forensic social worker who owns a counseling practice and a consulting business. In this show, we discuss the challenges of being successful in business while maintaining your integrity and staying true to yourself. Join me while I interview other professionals and share insights from life and experience.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Compassionate Climb podcast. I don't think I could be more thrilled. You are all in for such a treat today. I have Laura Long here and we are going to chat all things private practice, business, retreats, speaking engagements. How does she juggle it all? So let's get right to it and learn more about your climb. Laura, tell me about your career climb and how you got here.
Thank you so much, Julia. Thank you first of all for having me.
Yeah.
I'm not thanking you for that introduction because I don't think I can actually meet those expectations, but we are going to do our best here today. But I'm very, very thrilled to have been on your show. So thank you so much. I've been listening to your other episodes and I feel like people start from all over. I'm like, okay, do I start when I was 5? Do I start 5 years ago?
Whatever has the most significance to you.
So my journey to becoming a therapist, so I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm also a clinical supervisor in the state of South Carolina, where I live. I always wanted to be a therapist from, as long as I can remember, probably 11, 12 years old, which is very strange. I had this romanticized vision of being this like old, wise woman in a high tower somewhere in New York City, and people would come and I'd give them marriage counseling and I would just be amazing. That was my vision from the time I was 12. So my path was relatively linear. There's only so many ways to become a therapist, right? So I knew I had to go to college, graduate school, all of that. What I didn't prepare for was what came after being a therapist for a few years and heading into the consulting world. So I don't mean to skip over the therapy stuff, but I guess in the grand scheme of things, it's kind of boring. I went to college. I did the things, right?
Yep.
Became a therapist. I thought I had made it. I got to work in nonprofits. I got to work as a school-based counselor for kids in elementary school, and I really liked that. But I was always missing that element of working with couples. And I figured that would have to be private practice. So I think it was 2013 or 2014, I opened my very first private practice. I thought I had made it. Like that was the epitome of what I always wanted. Well, without giving away my age too much, I was a bit young to have gotten there. And I think I had a bit of a crisis. I was like, wait, what? I'm supposed to be doing this at like 50. I'm in my 20s. Where do I do? Like, where do I go? It was at that point that I started doing some consulting work or business coaching for colleagues in my immediate vicinity. People who were local to me, had never given it a thought of doing it on a much larger scale. I just was helping some friends and colleagues. They would buy me Starbucks and we would just, chat about private practice and I would give them some startup advice. But I did it enough times to where I thought, I wonder if anyone is doing this online. And at the time, there were a handful of coaches out there, not a lot, not nearly as many as there are now. And so I thought, what if I just put a program together, just put everything that I've learned over the last few years of how to start and grow a private practice, I'll just put it in a course. Courses were just starting to become popular. And so I thought, I have nothing to lose, right? I have this private practice that's going really well, but I want more. It's like the stereotypical serial entrepreneur of wanting to do all the things. So I put this course together. It was an 8-week program called Your Badass Therapy Practice, and it was very well received. I think it was like a whirlwind at that point, because after the first 2 times I ran it, I just suddenly started getting like droves of people hearing about it or reaching out to me about wanting to enroll. And I've now done it 12 times in 6 years. I finally moved it to like a self-paced program because 12 times running the same 8-week program, it'll like drive you batty. But to answer your question earlier, there was no way that I ever could have, if you had told me like 10 years ago that I would be doing what I'm doing now, absolutely would not have believed you. That was not part of the plan. The plan was to do therapy.
So you got there and in record time. And then once you got there, it sounds like you were feeling like something was missing. And you always had an entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, to start a business so early on in your career and have this mindset of like, couples, this is what I want to do, and this is how I can do it and do it my way. Tell me more about the private practice startup for you, because for you to have all of this information, it was obviously successful for you. You did it well. And then you very quickly felt like you had enough material to put an 8-week course together for people to take. And it was so well received. Where did all of that come from? Who helped you on your journey?
So if you had asked me back then, I don't know what my answer would have been, but looking back, hindsight, that whole thing, I get hyper fixated on things. And I think private practice, when I first dove into it, it became a literal hyperfixation for me. I mean, I just become a sponge and I want to learn absolutely everything I can about whatever topic it is. Since then, it's now been like plants and gardening, 'cause I'm like this old lady. It's been cloth diapers before. Like that's a whole nother episode. When my daughter was first born, I like got on the cloth diaper train and became super hyperfixated on that. Yeah. So I think, not to make light of it, but honestly, I think once I decided that I wanted to do private practice, it was my anxiety most likely, but something just led me to get so into learning all the things. So I just consumed, and I didn't do it to the point where it was overwhelming. I actually enjoyed learning as much as I possibly could about all the different ways to start and grow and market. I loved all of that. And I took what made sense to me and used it, and whatever didn't really make all that much sense or things that I wasn't interested, I just set that aside. There has to have been some sort of luck involved though. So I can't just say it was like, oh yeah, I'm just awesome. But I think I was lucky and smart at the same time. And I just
you consumed everything that you could. So it was a lot of your own kind of like self-starter, get access to what you could, and you found that there was obviously a lot of useful information. You got what you needed. What were your main sources? Was this just a lot of online research? Was it through podcasts, other consultants?
There really weren't too many podcasts back in like 2013 around private practice. I believe Selling the Couch was one that I listened to a lot. Zinni was Kelly and Miranda. They were around, and I took in some of their resources as well. There were a few books. One was called Practice Building 2.0. I think I have it over there on my shelf.
Yeah.
Tracy Todd maybe wrote it, and he was the president of AAMFT way back in the day. I also relied a lot on my professors from graduate school.
Okay.
I would reach back out to them, and one of them had a successful private practice that was very small since, he was running a program, but he was able to connect me to a lot of alumni from Auburn, where I went. And so I did a lot of just like, I wouldn't call it an interview per se, but I would just reach out to them and say, hey, I've talked to so-and-so. They said that you've got a successful private practice in, whatever town you live in. And I would love to just chat with you about your experience. And they were so gracious. And I think having a really strong alumni network at that time helped, because I didn't have access to things like this. Like there weren't a lot of consultants. There weren't as many podcasts. There weren't blogs. There weren't YouTube channels that I could use.
Yeah. So you went to the basics. You focused on the conversations and relationship building, and tell me about your experience. Wow. So you were clearly able to do it and do it successfully without having a business degree. I know I hear a lot of therapists that start practices and businesses say that we are ill prepared for the business side. And I know that you have returned to school for that. So tell me more about what led to that journey and how that's enhancing this entrepreneurial side to you.
Yeah. People have asked me like, why did you decide to go back to school? It's not like you're going to get a raise from your boss or anything. I would say that there were probably 2 or 3 reasons why I decided to go back to school, but to respond to something you were just saying, honestly, one of the reasons I decided to go back to school in 2021 to get my MBA was to be able to tell therapists who I serve whether or not they actually needed a business degree. Because I say it, as a coach, I was always like, they don't teach us this in graduate school and they really should. And I feel like we need more business training in graduate programs, specifically around private practice. And so I wanted to test the theory. If someone went back to school and got a business degree, would that really help them? Would it move the needle enough? And what I found out, Julia? I'm in my last.
I can't wait to hear this.
I graduate this August.
Woo!
I've discovered, you're going to think I'm like making this shit up. Therapists make the best business people with 0 business training.
Ooh.
Every single thing I've learned in my MBA program relates back to something I learned in my counseling program. They just call it different words. Like,
I think we just have the title for this episode. So let's repeat that. So therapists, you have found, can make the best business. Wow.
Yeah. Therapists are the best business people. They just don't know it because it was fed to us in our graduate programs as clinical skills, like clinical training. 100% of our clinical training is now being applied to the business world. They're just calling it something else so it sounds more businessy. But it's about like joining with somebody, if you're trying to like sell a product or a service, you listen, you ask questions, you really try to get to know what it is that person is looking for, what their hopes and dreams and fears are, right? And then you try to determine if what you have is something that can actually help them. And if it can, then you have a duty to help that person. If it can't, then you have a duty to help them find something else. But I think far too often therapists are trained to believe that business is yucky or slimy and sales is bad and all of that. But I'm here to say, for the record, as someone who almost has an MBA coming this summer, therapists make the best business people. We make the most amazing leaders. We are empathetic, compassionate, honest. We have integrity. We are the people who need to be leading business schools.
Man, do I wish that was the message I got throughout my graduate program, instead of the fact that I'm going to be serving my entire life and should not expect to earn a good living.
Yeah. You shouldn't, if you wanted money, you shouldn't be getting into this field. Is something a lot of
well, way to turn that right over. So
I'm
with that being
said,
I love it. So what about and you can back it up now and you'll have the degree to prove it. So what about the other side of business, beyond the relationships and building business and marketing? What about all the technical stuff, the profit and loss and the business entities and the business plan? Do you feel that the resources that are available out there that we can acquire on our own with some guidance can be sufficient? Or are you finding that area has been really helpful in this program?
I hope that no one from my MBA program is listening right now. I would say that what I've learned in my program has probably solidified some things that I already thought. I wouldn't say that I majorly learned anything transformative. In terms of the tech or the business startup side, when it comes to the world of therapy, at least, we can start a very successful business that clears 6 figures in our first year without a lot of capital. We don't need venture capital, or we don't need to take out a bunch of loans. That blows my mind, because what I've learned in my MBA program, it's not geared towards service-oriented people like me. It's geared towards those who maybe want to build a plant or a factory or something where you're selling an actual widget. And there's a lot of conversations about assets and, property that you have to acquire before you can even start making the thing. And I've just been sitting back in class being like, wow, therapists have it so easy in comparison. We are the product.
Yes.
So just nourish the brain that we have, the clinical skills, really stay on top of our game. If we are using the skills that a lot of us, it just comes inherently to us, we are going to be successful. We don't need a bunch of crap, you know?
Well, I'm sure that there's a collective sigh out there in the audience to hear that and have it affirmed with, you know, some backing. So the other piece that I'm thinking too, with regard to, so you helping other clinicians start their practices, themes that you're noticing, or any different advice that you may now shift, or that maybe you say with more confidence in terms of like common things that people tend to come to you for or struggle with. Like I'm thinking money mindset, or I'm thinking work-life balance, or I'm thinking paralyzed by perfection. Tell me more of that piece and some of your go-tos to help those starting a business with the struggles.
So I don't have any notes in front of me, but if I did, you would have just read them all out. Like, perfectionism, overwhelm is a huge one. A lot of therapists that reach out to me want to do it the quote right way. And so they're wanting me to teach them, like, what is the absolute right way? Like, give me the formula, the step-by-step plan to start my practice and go from 0 to 6 figures. And I always chuckle a little bit because, like, yes, some of the steps are going to be pretty similar across the board, but this is a creative process. This isn't something that comes with just like anyone who's telling you, like, here are these 14 steps and you go from 0 to 6 figures. They're most likely trying to sell you something. So I would say that the overwhelm, the perfectionism, wanting to do it the right way, being very fearful of, if I make a decision that ends up being the wrong one, will that like completely turn everything the opposite direction? Then I have to go back to the soul-sucking agency job. So I spend a lot of my time comforting and assuring therapists that there is no one right way. And as long as you're continuing to make decisions from a place of authenticity, as long as you're staying aligned with your values, with whatever you decide to do from the very beginning, you're going to be successul. Just don't do what you think you have to do because some random person on a blog said it has to be done that way. I can pretty much apply that to any industry, but definitely therapists.
Yeah, I mean, these are things that I've heard before, but it hasn't fully clicked for me like it has in this phase of my life. And I don't know if you can relate. I think it just comes with wisdom and with time and with experience and with the connections with other people, seeing it through them. But for me, like, I'm hearing you say all of this and I'm like, I get it now. I understand why it's so important to be clear on these things because it serves as a filter for everything. Who you choose to work with, even if you're in solo practice, who you're going to hire as your accountant or your attorney, who you're going to bring on if you expand your team, who you're going to associate with in terms of other clinicians and seek out advice from. And if you're really clear and in alignment and not necessarily looking to them for the answers, but it's more their specialty, picking their brain, coming at it from a curious place, then ultimately it's information. And then you can decide what to do with it. And I think we can be so afraid of doing it wrong. And we're dealing with people's lives and their mental health. But in all reality, it's about being able to justify why you made the choice that you did and taking that time to think it through and obviously following the guidelines. But yeah, I think that I'm sure it must be incredible once you can help people get past that paralyzing fear and see them soar. So tell me more about the journeys that you're seeing in these individuals that you're working with. And I know you have a collaboration. So you have someone else that you work with that focuses more on the groups. And how do you guys work that piece out?
Yeah. Well, and I wanted to touch on something that you had just said before I use it. But therapists often, like later on, after they've sort of met whatever success milestone they defined for themselves in the beginning, once they get to that place, they often look back with nostalgia at the beginning. Like, oh, I was so scared. I was so nervous. I'm like, what did I have to be nervous about? But the truth is, it is really scary. And starting any business, whether it's a therapy practice or any other business, it's extremely scary. And there's a lot on the line. It's a serious thing, right? My hope is that when I'm working with anybody in any capacity, whether it's like one-on-one or group mastermind or an in-person retreat, I want them to bring the fun back into their business. I know that this is a serious thing for many of us. This is our livelihood. Like we have to be able to support our lifestyle in order to continue doing this important work.
Right.
So I'm not saying that it shouldn't be serious. I'm saying that we need to also remember that for this to be sustainable, it has to also be fun.
Agreed. I'm glad that you
touch on there.
Yes.
So with your badass therapy practice, is that what you were asking?
Yes.
So like I said earlier, I started with the course, and from there I branched out and created some smaller offerings based on some of the modules in that large flagship program. There were other components that I wanted to really bring out and distill down into other programs. So I was doing a lot of courses, and then one of my students who was an alumni of that flagship program, her name is Anne-Marie Shaner, she reached out to me, and we always laugh because I don't remember when it was now. I think it was 2019 maybe. And she said, I mean, she was just very flattering, but she said, everything you taught has gotten me to where I am now, and I want to come work for you. And I was like, whoa. So she drove all the way from Tennessee to South Carolina, which I know on a map doesn't seem very far, but I'm pretty sure it's like an 8-hour drive for her. And we spent the weekend just brainstorming ways that we can collaborate and work together. And now she's been with me for, oh my gosh, 4 years going on.
Wow.
She is our official mindset mentor, because what I realized in my program is that there was a piece that was missing in some of the things that I was teaching to students. You know, I would often, in my flagship program at least, I would talk about some of the things that therapists needed to do to set up, and here's how to grow your practice, here's how to get consistent referrals, all of that. But one thing that was lacking was the mindset piece that's so important, you know? I think I just made this general assumption that if someone was going through the program, they'd already mastered that. But that's all, it's not true, because we are always needing to work on our mindset. It's not something that you just check the box. Oh yeah, I figured that out. I've handled my money mindset or scarcity or whatever the case is. So adding Anne-Marie to the team has just been so amazing, because I feel like a lot of times where we kind of joke that we're like mom and dad and we're this like yin yang approach where I'm a little bit more like direct and she's a little bit more nurturing. And I think that works really, really well, especially in a group capacity.
Absolutely.
So she handles a lot of, basically anything she does is going to be through the lens of how your mindset is affecting your success or your path to success. Whereas I'm more of here's the strategy, like here are the tools. But I truly think now that you have to have both in order for it to really get implemented.
Well, how beneficial, but how fun. It sounds like it's also really enjoyable for you both. And then you've taken it even beyond that. So tell me about the upcoming retreat that I will be present for, that I can't wait to experience.
Yes. It's funny, I hosted my very first retreat in 2019, so pre-COVID. You know, retreats have become all the rage post-COVID.
Oh, yeah.
People want to travel and they want to connect and they want to finally do things in person again. Well, I did my first retreat in Dallas, Texas. It was basically like a website in a weekend sort of retreat.
Okay.
That my like badasses, we call them. Anyone who's done the Your Badass Therapy Practice course, we now just refer to them as badasses. So, oh, you're a badass too. So I invited like 15 of my badasses from across the country, and they all flew to Dallas, Texas, of all places. Like I'm not from there. And we rented an Airbnb, you know, and we worked on our websites for a whole weekend. It was so much fun. It was amazing to see people in real life. You know, my husband thought I was crazy driving halfway across the country to meet essentially strangers. But I was like, these are not strangers. I've known them for years. So I kind of thought that was like a one and done thing. And then, of course, 2020 happened. The world shut down for a couple of years. I feel like those years are just like gone in my mind. What did I do? And once people started coming back, I thought, I want to do another one. That was really fun. So I've lost track of how many, not because I've done so many, I just don't know. I think I've done like 5 now since the end of the pandemic. I'm hosting one in Boston, Massachusetts, which is kind of near you. Yeah,
Sure is.
In June, but we'll be in Charleston, South Carolina, which is where I grew up. In May And I'm so excited. I have to tell you offline some things that I've scheduled for us to do.
Awesome.
But yeah, so I've hosted retreats that were specific on something, like that website and a weekend retreat.
Sure.
I've done another website retreat since then, but I'm finding that I have the most fun when I don't focus so much on content, like bringing people together who are all working on the same thing, and instead focus on personality. So bringing people together who I think are going to jive really well and who are all like in a very similar headspace, regardless of what they're working on or if they're even working on something. But when you bring people together who are all like high vibing, positive, like optimistic go-getters, they're ambitious, they want to see you succeed. Oh my gosh, when you put like 10 or 12 of them together in a room, I just back up and watch. It is absolutely amazing to see the energy that is created when these people come together, and they end up hosting retreats together themselves. They come on each other's podcasts. They host summits and speak at them. I mean, it's just been such a whirlwind. So I don't know where the future is for retreats or for me, to be honest with you. I just keep doing them because they are so much fun.
Well, and this will be a first for me. So I'll be on Whitney Owens' retreat next month and then the one with you. And I can't wait to experience what I've been hearing others describe. Really, this magic seems to happen and the depth of the relationship. So what I'm thinking I'll be able to compare it to. So when I was an undergrad, we did a ton of mission trips all over the United States. And I went to Honduras, and being with a group of people like-minded, you're there for a purpose. You are working together. You are collaborating. You're coming together at certain points throughout the trip. You never forget those individuals because of that shared experience and the insights that you have and the appreciation and the gratitude. And I'm sure the creativity and the business building that will come. So what are some things that you would say? I mean, you've already kind of spoken on it, but like the biggest, like that keep you going with retreats for someone who hasn't experienced one and is maybe considering going, what can they expect in terms of the takeaways when they leave and they're kind of reflecting back?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question to ask anyone whose retreat you're considering going to.
Yeah.
Because each retreat host might have a different agenda or itinerary or experience that they are wanting participants to have. So I don't want to speak for every single retreat host. Mine's just been this organic process of hosting them, learning from them, reading about them. There's a book on my shelf over there called Life-Changing Workshops. So if anyone is interested in hosting one themselves, that book has been really helpful for me to get not necessarily more structure, because some people don't want a structured retreat, but almost like in my own mind, how do I want to run a retreat so that it is transformational and so that those relationships that are forged during them are ones that last, that aren't just, oh, that was a fun weekend, and I'm back to the grind. I want it to really be transformative for people to come. So I would say reach out to the retreat host. If it's location specific and you just really want to go to Costa Rica, you can find several retreats that are there, and some are going to be specific to therapists or helpers and healers, and some might not be. You might be interested in a more business type retreat, but you also might be interested in a retreat that isn't about business. That's just about like soul care, as my friend Dawn would call it.
Love it.
So that would be something to ask them, because it really depends on what it is you're looking for.
That's helpful. I appreciate
every
that.
retreat I do is slightly different.
Yeah. Okay. And then speaking engagement. So I know you've talked at many summits and taught. And so what are your favorite things to speak on?
Talk about? So I feel like it's kind of a toss-up, because I've done conferences and workshops where I speak on a very specific thing. Like, for example, I spoke back in 2019 at Killen Camp from Joe Sanok. I talked all about copywriting, and it was so fun because I gave people very tangible strategies for how to write copy for their websites, for their email newsletters, their blogs. That is like juicy, mouth-watering, that really connects to your ideal client. And I felt like there were a lot of these like aha moments in the crowd, because so many therapists unfortunately say that they hate writing copy or they're not good at writing it. And so I loved that particular workshop because I felt people left with real, tangible, practical tools that they could use. And I then heard a lot of feedback afterwards where people implemented what I had taught.
Yeah.
On the other hand, there have been other workshops that I've presented at where I've talked more about like the mindset that I was talking about earlier, that was a piece that was lacking in some of my earlier trainings. And I actually love that now, probably as much, if not more, than the tangible, here's the strategy.
Yeah.
Because when I can see people's like eyes light up and they finally feel like this weight's been lifted, like the perfectionism maybe is going away, or they feel like they can just push through and do the damn thing. That to me is really inspirational. So they're leaving with less of that tangible stuff and they're more inspired.
That was all phenomenal material. So I guess we'll end with one final note of what would you say is a key takeaway for today that you would like whoever is listening to still be thinking about and kind of letting marinate if they are considering starting a business, in the early stages of a business, have any interest in any of the pursuits that you have taken on yourself. What would you tell them?
I would say that you don't have to know all the answers to get started. And if you focus and get hung up on needing to know all the answers before you take a step, you'll never get started. So the people who've been the most successful in business are ones who just started not knowing everything and they learned as they go. So that would be, if I could leave your audience with any key takeaway, it would be just do the damn thing. Take that first step.
Love it. Great advice. So what is the best way for people to follow you? You are personally hilarious. So where can people find you, work with you, see what you're up to?
Yeah. So you can find me at yourbadasstherapypractice.com. I help therapists at all stages of building their practices and now their, side hustles or their full-time hustles. Although I'm not a huge fan of the hustle culture, to be honest with you. But they can follow me there, get on my email list. I try to send really helpful, fun, motivational emails. Be aware that I use foul language and I sprinkle it quite liberally. So if you're easily offended, I might not be the best fit for you. And then on Facebook, that's where I'm at the moment. Just Your Badass Therapy Practice, and you'll find me there.
Love it. Well, we appreciate your time, all that you do, and I don't know how you fit it all in. So I'm glad that we got to bookmark where you're at now, but I'm going to stay tuned for the rest of the journey.
Thank you. I'm like Shonda Rhimes. If I'm successful in one area, I'm failing at another. So don't think I'm balancing it all, because right now my husband's putting my daughter to bed, not me.
Well, you make it look good.
Oh, thanks, girl.
Thanks
for having me.
Absolutely.
If you like what you're hearing, please rate and review. This will help others find us and benefit as well. The Compassionate Climb podcast represents the opinions of Julia Napini and her guests. The information provided is intended for educational purposes only and should not be taken as legal advice. If that is what you are seeking, please consult an attorney.